everybody. My name's Elliott.
And I'm Harsh.
And today we're doing a retrospective podcast over the Final Fantasy VII movie, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. This film originally released in 2005 and is a direct sequel to the original Final Fantasy VII. So Square brought it back to theaters the week before Rebirth comes out as a way to promote the game and to catch people up to speed because they want people to watch Advent Children because a lot of the stuff from the movie inspired Rebirth. What has been your experience with the Final Fantasy VII compilation?
So I am not as well versed as I would like to be in the Final Fantasy VII universe. I played the original game all the way through. I played a lot of Remake, but I never finished it because it's super long. So going to Advent Children, like I knew who these characters were. I understood the world, but I didn't quite understand like the more nuanced application of the characters, if that makes sense. Like it was an entertaining watch to me, but I don't think I quite got all I needed to from Advent Children.
Mm-hmm. So as for me, I'm pretty much in the same boat as Harsh. I consume pretty much everything FF7. The only thing I haven't really touched is Dirge of Cerberus, any of the discontinued phone game stuff. I played the Battle Royale when that was still active. I played a little bit of Ever Crisis. I'm not an active Ever Crisis person, but like pretty much I've played Dissidia on the PSP, which is the combat of that game is literally ripped from Advent Children. Remake, OG game, Crisis Core, you name it. I know pretty much everything story-wise and all of that, but I haven't played absolutely everything. But I've played all of the essential stuff. So I've seen this movie before a few times. You have not.
No. I was going into it basically completely blind. I had seen some of the 2005 original, but of course, like I hadn't seen the full movie yet. So I kind of understood what I was going into, obviously, because I had consumed Final Fantasy VII media before. I understood what I was going into, but I didn't quite grasp like how sprawling this movie would be, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like that was something that caught me off guard. But what did you think, like seeing it again?
So the first time I watched it was in my room on my big TV, playing it off of the Blu-ray on my PS5, just sitting in there, and it was really fun because I had the Pulse 3D headset on, had the Dolby Atmos going. I liked it. The story, first time around, I actually was so confused, so I had to pause the movie and look at the wiki because because randomly it will just completely jump around in time and it won't title card every time. It'll just fade to black and then just like all of a sudden something else is happening, which was really confusing. But the highlight for me was the music and the fight scenes.
Of course. I think like the fight scenes themselves were like very well choreographed. One of the previews that they played before the movie was like the director, who also directed the games. He was talking about how like actually choreographing the fight scenes were much more like cinematic and like more in line with his original vision in Advent Children, because it like is more so a battle of like very quick paced like martial arts combat, which isn't something you get in like a turn-based system, right? So Advent Children provided like their team like an avenue to kind of explore like their vision for pretty much like the remake's combat system as well. You see that with like major boss fights, even the first like reactor scene in the remake. Like the combat is very like aesthetically very similar to what we see in Advent Children, with like the swords, the effects. It's all like very contiguous in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at least like on the combat in the movies and in the fight scenes, it's held up the best out of everything in this movie. It's just like, at least outside of fight scenes, some of the visuals can look dated, at sometimes very impressive but dated. Mm-hmm. But the story follows Cloud from the first Final Fantasy VII game. He's the protagonist of the game. He's also the protagonist of this movie. Kind of following his grief after the events of the game, basically all the stuff that happened with Aerith and Sephiroth and Zack. And so, like, that whole thing, that's really why Cloud is so grumpy in this movie, because he's kind of a jerk in the original game, but he's nowhere near this emo. But also, like, it's not a mischaracterization. It is a full characterization, because, like, if you are a person that has PTSD, like Cloud clearly has, he's witnessed brothers in arms die on the field, especially, like, with all that kind of stuff, meaning that he is very distant from Tifa and everyone else from the original Final Fantasy VII. He rarely picks up his phone, and that the focus is mainly on Cloud, Tifa, Marlene, and this new character, Denzel, who is a orphan that stumbles across Cloud's motorcycle and is suffering from a disease called geostigma. It is formed by the life stream imbuing with Sephiroth's genome, which is connected to Genova, which was an extinction entity from another planet who was trying to eliminate all life on the planet and use it as a vessel of destruction, which is what Sephiroth set out to do in the original Final Fantasy VII game. So this kind of just follows that, kind of like thinking, what are the ramifications of Meteor at the end of Final Fantasy VII? What are the implications of killing a god, basically, whenever they fight Sephiroth, and basically like a fully charged up child of Genova, which is practically like another worldly, like, eldritch beast. Like, she had so much power, and put that with the Mako in the life stream making Sephiroth. And so the story kind of just follows that. Cloud, along with some of his other allies, also have geostigma, and it just follows their search for a cure and search for themselves in a world where everything seems sort of hopeless. So, I don't know, how does that sound? Pretty accurate?
I think, like, the what you talked about there at the end is, like, pretty like pertinent to this movie, like that feeling of just hopelessness and dread. Like, even with the color grading, there's this very, like, overwhelming sense of, like, a post-apocalypse, right? Like, the world has just not been the same since the events of, like, the first game, or at least part one, like the remake. There's, like, this very there's just an aura of, like, people, like, persevering, and there's hope in that, but there's also this sense that, like, they're completely out of their depths, that there's, like, this otherworldly force that's, like, actively fighting against them, and that I think is an interesting enemy for Cloud to fight against, because we see that with him trying to protect Denzel and Marlene as well, because you see, like, Sephiroth's remnants, he's trying to hunt them down while they, like, basically try to tear everything they can from Cloud. But then again, because the world is the biggest obstacle for everyone now, especially with geostigma and environmental hazards like that. I think it's interesting to see how Cloud fares against, like, phantoms, or otherwise, like, an enemy that isn't quite as specific as Sephiroth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like the idea of Sephiroth, which is such a Nomura thing, the director of this movie. He also did Kingdom Hearts, which is a convoluted mess of a series, and he kind of brought that to the compilation of Final Fantasy VII when he took it over in the mid to late 2000s, especially with Dirge and all that. But, like, just as a whole, as a movie, how do you think it fares today?
That's an interesting question, because I don't think there's an incentive to watch this movie if you're not actively part of, like, the Final Fantasy VII fandom. But if we see it from the lens of, like, you know, being involved in that community, I think it does stand alongside, you know, as an interim between, like, a remake and Rebirth. So it's interesting in that sense. But I also, like I said, I don't think if someone's not interested in Final Fantasy VII, I don't think they have a real reason to go out and watch Advent Children. But that might just be me.
No, yeah. I know at least in the 2000s when this movie came out, a lot of non-Final Fantasy VII or video game fans watched this movie. And the things they took away from it was a lot of like the fight scenes and the choreography and the visuals was what inspired them. So a lot of people who went on to create some of the most successful Marvel films actually were inspired by this movie, which is very interesting. But yeah, you're right. It's best to think of this as Final Fantasy VII 2 as instead of the Final Fantasy VII movie. It really does require you to already be invested in the fan base, like you said, and you already have to put through like hundreds of hours of content through the original and remake to get to this point where you think like, oh, I have to get through this movie, which is super confusing and convoluted. You're like, okay, I'm kind of used to this. I've played these games. But if you throw someone else who is not familiar with it, they will not understand anything that's going on at all. Like, there's constant jumps and black, like fade to black, and in the middle of a conversation, it'll just go to a whole nother scene and then come back. And then you're like, what the heck just happened? And then you realize, oh, that was a flash forward. Just kind of that thing is very, like, this is a disorienting movie, but if you can like keep your head strong and like stay through the choppy waters, you'll see some pretty serene stuff. Like, it's pretty preem. It's preem.
It is
Cyberpunk
pretty
lingo.
No way.
It's a good experience. I don't think it stands up as a movie at all, but watching it as a video game cutscene movie,
Yeah.
it's great. Like, literally some points in this movie, I'm like, they could easily like do the pull the camera to the back of Cloud and then it's just remake. Like, it's literally, they could make this a game and it would still probably work. Like fleshing out the story more and having it be less confusing, but yeah, it would still work as a game. So in all, as someone who's never seen it before, from a modern lens with remake and rebirth coming up, what do you think of Advent Children as a complete 2.5 hour like package?
So I think that like Advent Children stands like in a unique position where it's like it's not quite like any other piece of Final Fantasy VII spin-off media in a sense. Like, it feels very distinct in both its art style, its visuals, its place in like the overall timeline, as well as just like the form it's presented. It's a movie. I don't think there's any Final Fantasy VII movies. You have like Ever Crisis, you have Dissidia, you have, again, the remake is a trilogy of the original game. You have like this very like interconnected, very like expansive, all the like interconnected but expansive like web of spin-off media. But Advent Children stands in the middle because it's so like concise, if that makes sense. It's a movie. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes ish long. It's very it's very distinct. But I do think that like on its own merits as like just an entertaining film with like amazing action scenes, just amazing like set pieces in that way, I would recommend this to like even non-Final Fantasy VII fans, or even like non-video game fans, just because it's entertaining all the way through. Yes, the plot may be confusing at times because of like the time jumps, but I feel like the highlights here are like well worth trudging through all that for. Yeah.
So, best movie ever, worst movie ever?
The best movie ever.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm saying. All right, well, thank you for watching this MHS News podcast. I've been your host, Elliott Jorgensen, with my guest host,
Harsh Bains.
All right, well, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Follow our Instagram, follow our Facebook, all those. You know the drill by now if you've seen these.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye now.
Bye.